Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight at Loveworld USA News. I'm Joel Richard, and first, a quick look at the top stories this evening. Erica Kirk's message of forgiveness at Arizona Memorial draws bipartisan praise. Thune and Democrats trade blame as shutdown deadline nears and rival stopgap plans stall. President Trump assassination attempt trial nears end as Ryan Routh rests his defense. And Newsom's mask ban for law enforcement sets up federal court clash with Trump administration. President Trump extends TikTok deadline amid ongoing U.S.-China negotiations. And now to the news. Erica Kirk, widow of conservative activist Charlie Kirk, told mourners at a packed memorial on Sunday that she forgave the 22-year-old suspect accused of killing her husband, a declaration that prompted a standing ovation inside State Farm Stadium and wide admiration across the political spectrum. Citing Jesus' words, she said forgiveness reflected both her faith and what her husband would have wanted. Public reaction was swift and largely positive. Commentators from left and right, among them MSNBC's Joe Scarborough, former MSNBC host Mehdi Hasan, and former presidential candidate Andrew Yang, called the remarks powerful and moving. Republican figures, including Representative Nancy Mace, also praised the tone of grace and reconciliation. The memorial, which drew a large crowd and heightened security led by the U.S. Secret Service, featured tributes from President Donald Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, and Erica Kirk, who was recently named CEO and board chair of Turning Point USA. Now, while some critics said other speeches leaned political, attendees and observers wildly highlighted Erica Kirk's comments as the emotional centerpiece of the event. Authorities have charged Tyler Robinson with aggravated murder and other offenses in the September 10th shooting at Utah Valley University. Prosecutors have said they will seek the death penalty. Officials have not announced the final motive and say the investigation is still ongoing. Watch this.
That young man, on the cross, our Savior said, "Father, forgive them, for they not know what they do." That man, that young man, I forgive him.
Very stirring news indeed. In other news, with the September 30th funding deadline approaching, Senate leaders left Washington without a deal after both parties blocked each other's short-term spending bills. Senate Majority Leader John Thune is urging a vote on the House-passed clean continuing resolution that would fund the government into November 21st and add limited security money for Congress, the courts, and the executive branch. Now, Thune criticized Democrats' counteroffer, which bundled an extension of Affordable Care Act premium subsidies and other health provisions, as not serious and partisan. Democrats, led by Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, said they're willing to keep the government open, but insist any stopgap also address expiring ACA subsidies now, not at year's end. Now, they argue Republicans are refusing to negotiate and noted the GOP bill cannot clear the Senate's 60-vote threshold without bipartisan support. Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries have requested a meeting with President Donald Trump, with the president saying he was open to meeting but doubted it would change the outcome. Both chambers are set to return September 29th, leaving roughly 2 working days to avert a lapse in funding. The House has already passed the GOP CR on a narrow, largely party-line vote. In the Senate, 2 Republicans, Rand Paul and Lisa Murkowski, opposed the GOP measure, while Democrat John Fetterman supported it. Murkowski said she wants a shorter CR paired with already negotiated full-year appropriations and a temporary fix for ACA premium tax credits. Watch this.
It's technically days away if you were any kind of normal sentient being, but in Capitol Hill, this many days before a shutdown is basically an eternity. So nothing ever happens on a Monday. Everything always looks very dire. They're not going to be in session all week. What you want to watch for in terms of reopening is any indication that we might come back on Thursday after the Rosh Hashanah recess and then have some action Friday, Saturday, Sunday. into October 1st. So there is actually quite a bit of time before we shut down.
This just in today, Ryan Routh, accused of attempting to assassinate President Donald Trump at his West Palm Beach golf course in 2024, rested his defense today after presenting an unusual case in federal court. Representing himself, Routh called 3 witnesses, including a firearms expert and 2 acquaintances who vouched for his character, but declined to testify. Judge Eileen Cannon repeatedly interrupted Routh, limiting his questioning and cutting off testimony she ruled irrelevant or improper. Closing arguments are scheduled for tomorrow. Prosecutors allege that Routh scouted President Trump's golf course on multiple occasions and set up a sniper's perch with a Chinese-made rifle before being spotted and arrested by the Secret Service. FBI testimony placed Routh within 130 feet of President Trump, with prosecutors arguing that the rifle could have easily hit its target. Evidence presented included DNA and fingerprints tying him to the weapon, as well as a handwritten letter that prosecutors described as a confession. Routh's defense centered on claims that he was nonviolent and lacked the intent to follow through with an attack. Now, his witnesses described him as gentle and community-minded, while a firearms expert testified that the weapon was poorly maintained and unlikely to be reliable. Prosecutors countered that the evidence showed months of preparation, arguing that Routh's actions and writings demonstrated clear intent. Now, the trial, which has stretched far over 2 weeks and included testimony from nearly 40 prosecution witnesses, is now moving toward jury deliberations. If convicted, Routh faces life in prison for attempting to assassinate a sitting president. The outcome of the case will likely hinge on whether jurors believe his defense of incompetence and lack of intent outweighs the government's evidence of premeditation and planning. Let's take a look.
Ryan Routh's defense is to show the jury he didn't have the intent to kill then presidential candidate Donald Trump. Routh called a sniper instructor to the stand to talk about sniper tactics. The instructor says Routh could have tried to shot Trump from a further distance, and no shot was ever taken. But Routh's questioning was difficult to understand as he mumbled and fumbled through questions, breathed heavily into the microphone, mixed up pieces of evidence, and asked a number of unrelated questions. Routh asked so many unrelated questions to each of his 3 witnesses, Judge Eileen Cannon herself ended his direct examination for each of those witnesses.
Yes, we'll be watching to see how that story develops. In the United States, opposition for the Gavin Newsom signed law banning state and federal law enforcement from wearing masks while on duty in California is drawing immediate pushback from the Trump administration and setting up a likely courtroom fight. The measure, slated to take effect in January, comes amid heightened tensions over immigration enforcement tactics across the state. Acting U.S. Attorney Bill Asaley has said the rule is unenforceable against federal officers and predicted California would seek a court order to defend it. Legal analysts note the disputes will likely hinge on the Constitution's supremacy clause and whether California's mandate unduly interferes with federal operations. Gavin Newsom framed the ban as a transparency and civil rights measure, criticizing raids involving unmarked cars and masked officers. Supporters argue unmasking restores public trust. Critics counter that concealing identities can protect agents from doxing and retaliation during sensitive operations. The United States Supreme Court recently allowed ICE to continue searching stops in California, but did not address officer attire, leaving room for new litigation. With the law poised to take effect in January, both sides are preparing for a fast-moving legal battle that could clarify states' power to set on-the-job rules affecting federal agents. California officials have not detailed their litigation strategy. Federal officials say they will continue immigration enforcement under existing federal authority. Let's take a look.
Including immigration agents as well. This ban is in direct response to recent immigration raids in LA where federal agents there wore masks all while making mass arrests.
These masked men had no identification. These masked men did not provide any information, name, badge number, hidden from accountability, any transparency, any oversight. That's Trump's America, but it is not the America we've grown up in.
However, after that bill was signed, acting U.S. Attorney Bill Isaili saying in response that California does not have jurisdiction over the federal government. He went on to say that he's directed federal agencies that the law banning face coverings in California has no effect to their operations, saying that their operations would resume as normal.
We'll be live in more news after this break.
Pastor Chris in 1 Billion Homes Project is all about making sure the voice of our man of God, Pastor Chris Oyakhilome, arrives exactly when someone needs it the most. It's a global campaign to saturate the world with the gospel of our Lord Jesus like never before.
The gospel is going to go into places that it never was before, into disciplines and areas that it never was before, and establish a higher way of life.
Make a global impact today with your sponsorship of Pastor Chris in 1 Billion Homes Project. For every home you sponsor, you send the gospel where it's never gone. You become the reason someone receives life, a second chance, and finds Jesus. Through the dynamic Pastor Chris in 1 Billion Homes Project, we've been able to expand our global mission, touching more souls, more regions, and producing a wave of powerful testimonies from people whose lives have been forever changed. Your financial support as a Loveworld USA partner is not just generous, it's supernatural power for global impact. Let's keep sending the gospel into every home through the Pastor Chris in 1 Billion Homes Project. Sign up today and sponsor any of the following categories.
It's time for you to give the right sacrifice, the right seed, because it's time for you to get the right harvest.
You can sponsor Pastor Chris in 1 Billion Homes Project by calling or going on our website now. Sign up to be Pastor Chris in 1 Billion Homes Project partner today. God bless you.
Welcome back. Dealmaker President Donald Trump has once again extended the deadline for TikTok's U.S. operations as negotiations continue over the app's future. The administration is working to finalize a framework that would place TikTok under a new joint venture with majority American ownership and oversight by Oracle to address national security concerns. The President of the United States has pushed back the deadline several times in order to secure terms favorable to U.S. interest, while keeping the platform available to millions of American users. Officials confirmed that ByteDance, TikTok's parent company in China, would retain less than 20% ownership under the current proposal. He spoke directly with Chinese President Xi Jinping on Friday regarding the matter. White House officials say the discussions are part of broader talks between Washington and Beijing, which include technology and trade issues. President Trump is expected to sign an executive order this week declaring the agreement's compliant with U.S. national security standards. The order would extend the pause on enforcement of the ban or sale law by another 120 days to allow time for final approvals and paperwork. Watch this.
May or may not. They're negotiating TikTok right now. We may let it die, or we may, I don't know. It depends. Up to China. It doesn't matter too much. I'd like to do it for the kids. They like it. I mean, selfishly speaking, I did very well on TikTok, and I got the youth vote. I got numbers that nobody's ever even come close to in the Republican Party. Nobody. If you look back to Romney and all these people, they got practically no votes. I got a lot. And some was attributed to TikTok, and a lot was attributed to Charlie.
Chipmaker NVIDIA has announced that it plans to invest up to $100 billion in artificial intelligence from OpenAI, marking one of the largest private sector investments in AI infrastructure to date. The partnership will allow OpenAI to build and deploy at least 10 gigawatts of AI data centers using NVIDIA systems, with the first phase targeted to come online in the second half of 2026. The companies aim to finalize the details of the agreement in the coming weeks. NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang described the investment as a next leap forward, highlighting its potential to power the next era of intelligence. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman said the deal will provide the compute infrastructure necessary to support new AI breakthroughs and expand access to AI tools for businesses and individuals. The two companies have previously collaborated, including a $6.6 billion funding round for OpenAI in October 2024. The announcement comes shortly after NVIDIA committed $5 billion to support struggling chipmaker Intel, demonstrating the firm's broader push into AI-related technology. OpenAI and Microsoft have recently also signed a non-binding deal to restructure OpenAI into a for-profit company, positioning the AI company for accelerated growth and additional investment opportunities. Now, analysts note that NVIDIA's substantial investment could draw antitrust scrutiny due to its sheer size and potential influence over AI infrastructure. Jensen Huang emphasized the broader economic implications of AI, predicting that increased productivity from AI and automation could eventually lead to shorter work weeks and also improved quality of life. We could spend more time on weekends with family, get some reading done, travel. Nothing is better than that, he said. He also suggested that while AI may eliminate some jobs, it will create new ones and transform existing industries, signaling a major shift in the future of work. Watch this.
The Intel partnership is about recognizing that accelerated computing and AI's day has arrived. Remember, general purpose computing was invented practically 60 years ago. And for the last 60 years, we've been following that basic blueprint, that basic architecture, to build the ecosystem, the computing ecosystem of the world. And so all of a sudden, accelerated computing's time has come, and we're fusing, if you will, the Intel architecture with the NVIDIA architecture to bring them into the world of accelerated computing and AI. So that's what that partnership's about. This partnership, I mean, this is, monumental in size. There's never been an engineering project, a technical project of this complexity and this scale ever. And it really just says that AI was in the early adopter phase in the labs, and finally it's breaking out into just about every single industry, every single use case we can imagine.
More news on the U.S. economy. Federal Reserve Governor Stephen Moran said the central bank's policy rate should be closer to 2.5%, far below the current 4% to 4.25% target range set after last week's quarter-point cut. In remarks to the Economic Club of New York, Moran argued today's stance is very restrictive and risks the Fed's employment mandate, marking the widest divergence from the rest of the rate-setting committee this year. Moran, on unpaid leave from his role as top White House economic advisor, said his analysis is independent and that President Donald Trump hasn't directed his views. His short Fed term expires in January, though he could remain until a successor is confirmed. A dual-role arrangement that has heightened scrutiny of Fed independence amid President Trump's public pressure for deeper cuts, and also a contested effort to remove Governor Lisa Cook. Laying out his case, Moran said reduced immigration should ease rent inflation. Rising tariff revenues could shrink deficits, and an aging population points to a lower neutral rate, factors he says justify faster easing. Many economists counter that fewer immigrants tighten labor supply, lift wages, and potentially prices. Moran also floated re-examining the 2% inflation target only after it's been durably achieved. The Fed's preferred core measure rose 2.9% year over year in July. Other officials struck a cautious tone. St. Louis Fed President Alberto Mussolini warned there is limited room to cut before policy turns stimulative and risks reigniting inflation. Policymakers' latest projections envisage two more cuts this year and one in 2026, well short of the pace Moran favors. Watch this.
Subsequent to last week's meeting of the Federal Open Market Committee, it should be clear that my view of appropriate monetary policy diverges from those of other FOMC members. I view policy as very restrictive, believe it poses material risks to the Fed's employment mandate, and would like to explain why. There's no perfect means for determining appropriate monetary policy at any given time. That said, rules of a Taylor type are a useful way to gauge where the federal funds rate should be set based on the prevailing macroeconomic conditions and outlook. Let me first say that I find these types of policy rules to be useful as indications, but I'm not slavishly devoted to them. The Taylor rule suggests policymakers ought to think about three key variables in determining the appropriate Fed funds rate: inflation, the neutral rate of interest, and the output gap.
Don't go anywhere. The news continues after this break.
It's easy to set up, quick to start, and packed with value. Smarter streaming starts here with the Alpha TV Stick. Just plug and stream anytime, anywhere. Discover a curated lineup of content designed to inspire, live broadcasts and global events, inspirational films and series, children's programming, healing and teaching sessions, all on demand. With millions of downloads worldwide, the Alpha TV app is transforming lives across the globe. And now, we're on a mission to reach 1 billion downloads of the Alpha TV app, and you can be part of it. Join the global wave with 1 billion Alpha TV app downloads worldwide. Bring the higher life into every home. Order your Alpha TV stick today and experience smarter streaming. Alpha, the higher life is here.
We have received news from our sources on ground that the Israel Defense Forces have pressed deeper into Gaza City as part of its ongoing military campaign to take control of the territory's largest urban center. Israeli officials said airstrikes and artillery fire targeted Hamas positions, including a weapons facility and rocket launching sites, with the IDF claiming at least 15 fighters were killed in recent operations. The offensive, which now involves 3 IDF divisions, comes amid rising international criticism over the humanitarian conditions in Gaza. Despite this, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu dismissed recent moves by countries such as the UK, Canada, and Australia to formally recognize Palestinian statehood. There will be no Palestinian state, Netanyahu said in a statement on Sunday, reiterating that his government will continue expanding settlements in the West Bank. He also added that the recognition of statehood will not happen west of the Jordan River. Israel's foreign ministry said such recognition undermines peace efforts and instead urged the international community to pressure Hamas to release hostages and disarm. Families of the hostages echoed the stance, condemning the recognition and insisting that any post-war discussions take place only after all captives are returned. Let's take a look.
Most important Western states, very close allies of Israel. The United Kingdom is one of the closest allies of the United States. It's a member of the Security Council. And Britain has a historical responsibility for the tragedy that's unfolding in Palestine, in Israel and Palestine. So I think what we are seeing now is that not only the rest, most of the international community, but some of the closest allies of the United States and Israel are saying to Israel, enough is enough. So the pressure is really multiplying on Israel. Israel is becoming more isolated. And I think the larger point, even some of America's closest allies are breaking up with the United States. They're saying they no longer really believe that the United States could really basically make a difference in the peace process between Israel and the Palestinians.
So you're saying...
More developments on the international front tonight. Several British charities severed ties with Sarah Ferguson, Duchess of York, after newspapers published a 2011 email she allegedly sent to Jeffrey Epstein calling him a steadfast, generous, and supreme friend. A spokesperson for Ferguson said she wrote the message on legal advice after Epstein threatened to sue over comments linking him to sexual abuse. Julia's House Children's Hospice said it would be inappropriate for Ferguson to remain a patron. The Natasha Allergy Research Foundation, Prevent Breast Cancer, and the Teenage Cancer Trust also ended associations following the revelations. Now, our sources said it could not independently verify the email's authenticity. The reported emails surfaced a month after fresh scrutiny of Prince Andrew's ties to Jeffrey Epstein, with leaked correspondence suggesting contact as late as 2015, just 5 years beyond Andrew's public claim he ended contact in 2010. Andrew relinquished royal duties in 2019 after a BBC interview widely criticized for downplaying his relationship with Epstein. Ferguson had previously apologized for accepting £15,000 from Epstein in 2011, calling it a gigantic error of judgment and pledging to repay the money. Her office now says the conciliatory email was a legal tactic, but charities said maintaining public trust required ending her roles. Watch this.
On the steps of Westminster Cathedral, it looked like the Duchess of York was being readmitted to the ranks, as just over a week ago and alongside her ex-husband, she attended the Duchess of Kent's funeral. But any pathway back to respectability has been quickly closed. A series of charities ending their association with her after the emergence of emails she wrote to Jeffrey Epstein, in which she called the late sex offender her supreme friend, humbly apologising for ever linking him to paedophilia.
Just before we end the news tonight, a quick look at tomorrow's weather forecast. And to end the news tonight, let's have a quick recap of the top headlines. Erica Kirk's message of forgiveness at Arizona Memorial draws bipartisan praise. Thune and Democrats trade blame as shutdown deadline nears and rival stopgap plans stall. Trump assassination attempts trial nears end as Ryan Ralph rests at his defense. Newsom's mass ban for law enforcement sets up federal court clash with Trump administration. And President Trump extends TikTok deadline amid ongoing U.S.-China negotiations. And that's the news for tonight. Join us at the same time tomorrow for more news. I am Joel Richards, signing off. God bless you. God bless our armed forces. And God bless the United States of America.